For over 1,000 chapters, we thought we knew exactly what it would take to kill Monkey D. Luffy. A blow too strong, an opponent too powerful, a battle impossible to win. But nobody, absolutely nobody, expected the answer to be hidden inside a single line spoken by Shanks almost 30 years ago. It's not yet time to fight him. That line was said decades ago in a flashback to a completely different man. And now, in chapter 1189, it's come back to show us that Luffy's fate might have been written before he was even born. Because right now, hanging from a tree, with 3 legendary swords driven into his chest, bleeding, drained, his eyes already white, Luffy is about to die. And the man who might save him is the same man Oda has made clear, chapter after chapter, no longer has the strength to survive this fight. If Gaban dies in front of Luffy, what that triggers could be the single most important moment of the entire final saga. Because we've seen this happen before. We've seen Luffy lose control of his own fruit the moment someone he loves is about to die. And this time, the trigger might not just unlock another gear. It might unlock the form Oda has been hiding since the very beginning. The dark face of the sun. God himself. Let's lay out everything we know so far, because this chapter is dense and every detail matters. The clash between Luffy and Imu has been going on for chapters, and from the start, it was clear this wasn't an even fight. Imu isn't just the world's hidden ruler pulling strings behind the government. According to the strongest fan theory out there, he's something far older. One of the 20 kings who founded the world itself. He carries a ring of black flames from which he pulls weapons one by one, each tied to one of the 19 kings who founded the world 800 years ago. We already saw him use the Void Sword to run Luffy through. Now, in this chapter, he reveals a second sword, Fragarach, explicitly described as the Sword of the Sea God. And its effect isn't just to wound, it drains life force. Meanwhile, the rest of the Straw Hats are scattered across Elbaf, each facing off against the Holy Knights, Imu's direct servants who wield the other swords among the 19. Zoro faces Summers, who wields Gran, the Sword of Wrath, belonging to the Shepherd family. Sanji faces Killingham, who carries Longinus, the sacred spear of the Rimosev family. And here we already get the chapter's first major structural reveal. Each Holy Knight inherited their weapon from a specific bloodline, one of the 19 founding families. That means the government's power structure isn't random. It's hereditary. A caste system built 800 years ago, and it's still fully intact today. But that's not even the most shocking part of the chapter. It's just the foundation. It's what makes us comfortable before everything starts falling apart. But that's where things start getting strange. While Luffy agonizes under the sword draining his life force, we get a flashback that completely changes how we understand the past of Rox D. Zebek, of Shanks, and of the very concept of a world king. Right after Rox eats his fruit and kills his own father, he meets with Jaru, Gaban, and Shanks. Consumed by fury, Rox declares he'll avenge his father and every soldier who died. And this is where Shanks drops a line that fans have basically ignored for years, but which now carries an entirely new weight. Shanks says his own desire for revenge is no smaller than Rox's, because Harold was his friend too. But then, with a far more serious expression, he reveals something even the others in that group didn't know. The world government's plan to conquer Elbaf wasn't the final goal at all. It was just a step in preparing for a much larger war. Rox explodes. He doesn't care about the government's war. He wants revenge. And that's when Shanks asks the question that changes everything. Do you even know who your real enemy is? Rox answers without hesitation. The world government. Shanks corrects him. No. The one controlling Harold was the world king. At that point, Jaru, stunned, says that's impossible. The government's own policy forbids crowning a single ruler. But Shanks already knew. He already carried the mark of the abyss, his pact of the shallow sea with Emu. He knew Emu existed before anyone else in that group. This changes everything we thought we knew about Shanks's timeline. He didn't discover Emu recently. He knew decades ago as a young man, long before he lost his arm. And there's another detail almost nobody's talking about. Decades later, in the present, it's Jaru, who now reveals to the giant King Haruden that the attack on Elbaf couldn't have been a unanimous Levelly decision. It could only have come from that man. In other words, Jaru also knows Emu exists. A secret that should be restricted to the highest levels of world power has been circulating among pirates, kings, and revolutionaries for decades, while the rest of the world remains completely in the dark. And this might be exactly where Oda left his biggest clue. Let's put the pieces together step by step, because each one here connects in a way that feels far too deliberate to be coincidence. First, Shanks tells Rocks it's not yet time to face Emu, and that this king's power is beyond human comprehension. If defeating him were possible, someone would have already done it. And it's at exactly this moment that Rocks recalls that not even he, the most feared man of his generation, was able to defeat the world government and its king. Second, decades later, it's the spiritual heir of that generation, Luffy, who is now facing Emu, and he's losing. He's being stabbed, drained of his life force, on the verge of death. Third, in the middle of that agony, Gaban appears, wounded, hastily treated by Chopper but far from healed, to block the killing blow. Now, look at the pattern Oda has already used before. At the height of the fight against Kaido, Luffy only awakened the true power of his fruit when he was at death's door, crushed, hopeless, on the verge of giving up. That's where Gear 5 was born. And now, once again, Luffy is on the brink of death. But this time, the threat isn't just to him. It's to someone he loves. Gaban is old, wounded, facing the most powerful being in the world alone, to protect Luffy's collapsed body. If we follow the exact logic Oda has used repeatedly throughout the story, the death of a loved one in front of Luffy is never just tragedy, it's a trigger. Here's the detail nobody's connecting yet. Remember the reveal about Luffy's fruit? We already know from information dropped throughout the Elbaf arc that there are two interpretations of the Sun God Nika. One tied to liberation, joy, and freeing the oppressed, and another entirely different one, tied to total destruction. What if these two faces aren't two different deities, but two forms of the same power? The form we've seen so far, Gear 5, is the liberating face. It's the Nika who laughs, who breaks the chains, who returns hope to the oppressed. But every myth of liberation has its counterpart. What if the final form of Luffy's fruit is exactly that other face? Raw, visceral, born not from joy but from absolute fury? Now connect that to where we are right now. Luffy dying, 3 swords buried in his body, his life force being drained by a weapon called Fragarach, the sword of the sea god. And the man who saved him from the children, who cared for him, who represents the last living generation that knew Rox D. Zebek and survived, is about to die in front of him, trying to protect him. But wait, there's one more detail that changes everything. Emu wielding a Fragarach strongly suggests it was his original weapon among the 19 swords of the founding kings, which means Emu himself might be the sea god of One Piece. Not just a ruler disguised as a deity, an actual god, carrying a weapon that bears his own title. And if Emu is the sea god, and Luffy is the vessel of the sun god, then this fight stops being just pirate versus government. It becomes a clash between opposing deities. decided 800 years ago, and only now finally being settled. If this theory holds up, the implications for the rest of the final saga are massive. First, this reinforces that the war in Elbaf isn't just another war arc. It's the point of origin for everything. It's where Rox first learned Emu existed, where Shanks earned his pact with the shallow sea, and now it's where Luffy might finally break past the limits of his fruit. Second, if Gaban really dies in this fight, it closes an extremely symbolic generational cycle. Gaban represents the last living bridge to the era of Rox, Roger, and Garp. If he falls while protecting Luffy from the very same enemy Rox was never able to defeat, his death becomes far more than an emotional loss. It becomes the definitive passing of the torch between generations. Third, and maybe most important, if Luffy's next gear really does represent the dark face of Nika, that completely shifts the tone of the story's final stretch. We wouldn't just be watching another power upgrade. We'd be watching Luffy forced to access a part of himself he might never have wanted to use. A power born not from the joy of liberation, but from the pain of loss. And that would have direct consequences for how the final confrontation with Emu plays out. Because a Nika driven by fury wouldn't just be stronger. He'd be unpredictable. Dangerous, even to Luffy's own allies. So, putting it all together, Shanks knew Emu existed decades before anyone else in that group. He warned Rox that it wasn't yet time to face him, because not even the most powerful man of that generation could win. 30 years later, it's Rox's spiritual heir, Luffy, facing that same enemy. And once again, it takes someone from that lost generation, Gaban, stepping in to try to stop the death. If Oda follows the pattern he's built across more than 1,000 chapters, the pain of losing Gaban won't just be a sad moment in the story. It'll be the spark. It'll be the moment Luffy, with no control left, finally unleashes the other face of the Sun God. And if that happens, maybe only then will we truly understand the line Shanks spoke all those years ago. Not because the time to defeat Emu has finally arrived, but because this time, Luffy might have no choice but to become something even he doesn't recognize. If this theory actually turns out to be true, it could completely change how we see the ending of One Piece. But what do you think? Do you believe Gaban is going to die in this fight? And if he does, do you think that's really what triggers Luffy's true final power? Let me know your theory in the comments.